Jerry, I know we've joked about this team not winning on Wednesdays. Do you know the last time this team won a Wednesday game was in May?
Sadly, I do not.
It was May.
Oh, my. I was going to say, don't ruin this for me. But yeah, it's been a while. And I will say that it's just been generally a good week. I think we've played very well for the most part.
Yeah, what's been different? I mean, you watch this team. They're what, a blown save and a sacrifice fly away from having won maybe 7 straight. What's been different?
Yeah, I mean, I could say too that we've had some comebacks in there that weren't probable. So,
don't ruin it for me either. Hey, come on now, don't ruin it for me either. I got a narrative here.
We have, you get a little bit of energy. We had some energy with full houses versus the Blue Jays at home. I think it was an energizing series. And as much as it hurt losing Jared Kelenic for a period of time, I think we got a little bit of a jolt, especially in Minnesota from Kate Marlowe. There are so many small things that contribute to that just a little spark that starts a good week. And lo and behold, we look up and it hasn't been a good week. It's been a good month. July's been a really good month for us. We're actually trending maybe the best July in the last, decade for us, which is something. And it's been happening pretty quietly.
I think Ryan Divish, if I remember right, had said something along these lines early in the season, Salk, maybe even before the year, Jerry, about Scott Servais, and one of his greatest attributes is he is a machine. He just does not waver. He just, through the ups and the downs and everything else, he is just such a steady force. And I'm curious from your perspective, just through the ups and downs and the emotions and the peaks and valleys of this season, how critical is it to have your skipper be so flatlined?
Yeah, I wouldn't call him flatlined. He's just good at managing it. We all have, ups and downs and moments, but Scott does a great job of focusing on what needs to be done. And whether that's, executing pitching change, managing the staff, or, trying to establish a feel in the dugout, in the clubhouse. He does have his finger on that pulse pretty good. And I think he does a remarkable job. Scott's not stoic when the door closes, but he does
if he had a heart rate, so if he had a heart rate monitor on during the game, his heart rate would actually be a little bit like ours as fans.
Yeah, his heart rate isn't running like his face. Scott has a great way of not letting you see anything that affects him. And I think I could say that about some of the great closers of our time. I think I look back to, the managers who were great at what they do over time, and you'd never know if they were winning or losing the game. They just focus on what needs to be done.
How would you be if you had to sit in the dugout and after every missed bunt, every bad, everything, the camera immediately flashed to your face?
It would not look like Scott.
I'm sure. I believe it. But it seems like he's pushed some of the right buttons. We heard him talking about Julio and some swing changes. I like the way he sort of has referenced Julio now a couple of times in his plan late in games and being willing to listen. It seems as if that's just been like a year-long process for him trying to manage and get the most out of the most talented player on that team.
And I imagine that it'll be like that throughout Julio's career, and and hopefully the next Julio's, to the extent that we have guys that talented. It's when you have players that talented that are capable of so much, more is required to draw it out of them. And his ceiling, his impact is so high. And here, especially in the last week or so, we've seen him step up, and he particularly in the last few games in Minnesota. And I think you saw a little bit of a change in the way his body is situated in the batter's box, and the way he stays in his legs through his swing. And I don't know if it's just something in a moment or if it's an adjustment he's making, to be honest with you. But he lifted the ball. He's always hit the ball hard. His trajectory was off. He was hitting it hard on the ground, usually to the pull side. And I thought the greatest sign was him lacing line drives to right center, hitting opposite field homers. That's a very good thing. And, hopefully we're getting ready to get into the hot version for Julio.
Jerry, I think one of the things that I've learned over the course of the years and in talking to you and certainly all the time you give us on this show every week is you can't general manage like a fan. You can't manage like a fan. You can't make moves emotionally like a fan and just look at one game or 1 week and just make moves irrationally through that emotion. Yet the trade deadline does come in 4 or 5 days or so. Next Tuesday, 6 days. What kind of role do these next 3 games and the first game of the Boston series play in some of the decision making that does have to come?
They'll play some, and they always do. But your team's performance should define what you do. And, part of it is what happens. We typically focus on ourselves, and we try to maintain that throughout. But you get into this time of the year, especially around the deadline, and a lot of it does matter, where you stand among other teams in the league and what the likelihood is of being able to jump that train, so to speak. I've said this before. Our pitching is good enough that if we can get on the dance floor for the postseason, we can do some damage, and we're aware of that. We want to put ourselves in a position to do that over the course of the season's final 2 months. That said, we're always focused on how do we do the responsible thing in making sure we're constantly building our core. And if we have a chance to do that through the course of these next 6 days, we'll do it. If we have a chance to make ourselves meaningfully better without putting ourselves in a precarious position moving forward, we'll do it. We'll try to be responsible in how we address our roster's needs with what's available on the market.
So what are your conversations with other teams like right now?
Back and forth. We've not gotten to the stage in the exercise where it's gotten where I would call it in the red zone on any deals. We've expressed interest in players we think fit for us and do make us better in 23 or moving forward. We have received incoming calls about players on our roster, and I would say it's been pretty broad this year. There are not a large number of defined sellers in this market. There are a lot of teams that are trying to thread a needle or flat out buying, and there are very few teams that are selling or that are populating the market with the types of players that contending teams look for at this time of year.
So how do you define, one thing we talk about a little bit of the idea of a rental. How do you define a rental?
Rental, I actually hate the term, but a rental is a player on a pending free agent contract. So this player is effectively, unless you can work something out over the season's final 2 months, which is highly unlikely with a pending free agent, they are leaving when free agency opens up in the off season. So it's a player who's going to be with your organization, barring a magic extension 2 months from free agency. They're going to be with you for 2 months.
And do you have interest in rentals, or are you explicitly and only looking at?
Can we come up with a new name? Okay.
I know.
I think that's part of the problem.
Is it degrading? Is that the problem? Sort of degrading to the players, like he's a house or something?
Yeah, and this is it's a personal thing for me. I do think it's a pretty common reference. So I don't want to get up in arms about it, but they're pending free agents. They're short-term players.
Right.
They're here. They're only here for a short period of time, and we're not opposed to bringing in a short-term roster fit. It depends on what you have to give up to get it. We're not willing to purge future Mariners teams, and what that could be for our future, unless we feel like that is a player who puts us over the top. And I think for it to be a player who puts you over the top, you have to be close to the top in order to make moves like that, if that makes any sense.
It does. Jerry, how big of a deal is the collective market? My old late, great real estate boss used to say to me, Brock, understand the market is what the market's willing to pay. Well, we saw the first, I know you made a transaction yesterday on a reliever and an arm, but we saw the first kind of big move, right? The Angels go in, they make a trade with the White Sox for a starting pitcher and another, relieving arm. Does that move and the value of that move, does that start to create a market, or is it just, hey, singularly, it's team by team and there really isn't a collective market?
First, I will say that your reference to your real estate boss was about as Jerry Maguire as it gets. That was awesome. But and as it relates to the market, yeah, I mean, I guess there's a baseline for what is now expected of the next player, and both players that went to the Angels in yesterday's trade are pending free agents, so they embody what we just talked about. That I don't know if many teams are really open to trading players beyond those that are short term right now. We haven't really seen that move yet, but it does establish a baseline. There are other players of that quality that are going to get moved in the next week or so, and we are at least presently we have spent almost all of our time focusing on players that we feel make more sense for us moving forward. And based on market prices, that could change for us in the next 6 days or so, again, depending on what the return. And we're not opposed to acquiring any type of player if they fit, provided it makes sense for the present and future of our organization.
We did see that you made a move yesterday, bring in a guy who I assume is kind of a spot starter who has options, so he kind of go up and down. But maybe more interestingly is the corresponding move with Marco Gonzalez going to the 60. Does that mean he's done for the year, or is it just more of the retroactive situation for the roster spot?
It's the latter. Actually, in doing the simple math, today is Marco's 60th day out. So he's already achieved 60-day IL status. So he could, in theory, be activated tomorrow. So it's nothing more than a simple admin move. He's already been out for 60 days. So, that was a simple roster adjustment that we could make to add a pitcher with pretty good stuff who's had a fair bit of major league experience and give us depth, headed into the final 2 months, where we've talked about, young pitchers. We have taken on a couple of dings, and we have run a lot of guys out there with very limited major league experience. And Trent Thornton is not long in the tooth. He's 29 with a couple of 3 years of major league service. But having guys that are experienced as we get into the season's final 2 months is important.
Jerry, we talked to you after last season as you headed into the winter meetings and where free agency went and how quiet the trade market was. You talked about right now it is these impending free agents that tend to be the conversations and not a lot of the others quite yet. And I'm just wondering, this third wild card, it's awesome, right? These wild cards, it's opened it up. It's more competitive. 21 of 30 teams in the league as we sit here today are within 6.5 games of the wild card. But I wonder the impact that wild card has on this trade deadline, on that acquisition phase of the trading game, and can it still be as active as it once was?
Oh, I think it's going to be incredibly active, and usually it is active in the final 72 hours. And I would say that it's not too dissimilar from what we see in the first 72 hours of free agency. Roughly the public clamor is, why is it so quiet? Why aren't they doing anything? And then here comes the fire hose. And there's an update on, MLB Network or ESPN every 6 minutes. But it's going to be active. I think it won't be defined until, Sunday or Monday for so many teams because of what you said. That third wild card keeps so many teams engaged, and we're one of them. Frankly, it's it gives you something to shoot at, and there are absolute buyers, and then there are teams that are, as I used the phrase before, trying to thread a needle. You're trying to find a way, to situate yourself to best contend in 2023 while not robbing from future years, because you understand the odds are a little bit long. And that captures about 20 teams in our league, and then there's going to be another couple on the fringes, or rebuilding teams that are primarily young, and that leaves very few teams that have the types of players available in the market to really make a dent. But somehow multiple of those teams that are on the fringes will decide to go the other way by Sunday or Monday, and it'll get active.
It's got to be, I don't know whether frustrating is the right word or what, but trying to make a decision which in your head shouldn't be made based on 2, 3, 4 games of baseball, but in some ways will almost have to be, because that's what the situation and the record and the standings will end up dictating.
Yeah, and I'll go back to trying to do the responsible thing. If left to our own devices, we're all competitors. Whether it's in the front office, it's on the field, you see opportunity. Every one of the players in our clubhouse, we want them to get excited by what happens at the deadline and feel motivated. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But, you've got to do the smart thing. And virtually there's 30 teams, and I would say most of them are going to make some type of transactions that are going to affect their major league club in the next 6 days. And that's kind of an exhilarating time. You can do things to make impact from an organizational standpoint, but you can't do stupid things if you intend to sustain. And that's what we've really built this on, is the desire to sustain, and we're going to try to avoid stupid things.
Okay, so you mentioned Jerry Maguire, so then I'll just follow up. I'm just kind of curious, do you have to have irresponsible guy or gal in the building? Is there just that irresponsible voice that bounces into your guys' offices and into the media rooms and just starts to spew totally, as you just said, stupid, irresponsible stuff just to put it out there on the table?
Oh yeah, and you want that. You want you want a variety of opinions. What's possible? What could we do? And you're going to have the risk averse. You're going to have the risk takers. And some people are going to toggle back and forth based on the type of player that you're looking to acquire. But this is an interesting time, because it's when you find out. My face, and I would say this of Justin, our faces don't necessarily look like Scott's in the dugout, but we're trying to remain balanced in the way we're making our decisions and do the right thing more broadly for the club.
What did our texter say about Scott's face? That's funny. That
he called it resting pissed face. I don't know whether that's fair or not, but he said if you just always look mad, then when you are mad, no one will know the difference.
Yeah, I will say, on occasion, I have been in a situation in my lifetime where Scott's come out to the mound to visit me, and my first reaction is, "Why are you mad at me?" I'm trying, but he is balanced, and we're trying to do that same type thing with our trade deadline, and we have needs we would like to address for 23. We are equally as focused on putting players in place who we feel like help answer questions for us moving forward. And our general plan has never changed. And the thing that changes day to day is how much clearer it becomes on who's available. Do they fit us? Are they actually acquirable based on what we have? And I think that's what makes it fun. And that's why it changes day to day, because there might be 3 more teams that enter the fray on either side of the ledger tomorrow or later today.
Yeah, I would think it must be an interesting spot. You're almost at time, like you want your team to show you one way or another, win 4 straight, lose 4 straight, do something to make this, not that you want them to lose 4 straight, but make this decision a little bit more obvious. And I would think there are teams around the league you're watching saying, man, I really hope the whomever loses 4 straight so that so-and-so becomes available, and they just, make him available because they can't realistically compete anymore.
Oh, believe me when I tell you, I would love that if we could will teams to lose 4 in a row. I also would say that we have an uncanny knack as an organization for picking up the phone and expressing interest in player X, whether that is a prospect, a young major leaguer, or the pending free agent, and that player is almost destined to go on a 72-hour heater where either the availability becomes questionable or the price just went through the roof. We're good at it. We've been doing it for years. We actually, for a few years, we referenced ourselves as the Hall of Fame makers. Like, we make a call, this guy's definitely going to go on a hot streak.
Hey, last thing for me here, Jerry, how are your young arms doing? I think back last year to George, and I think it was about August. It was maybe the only little stub of the toe, and then kind of found himself into September. And just kind of curious in the calendar year, and for the Woos and the Millers as we're pushing in here now into the games in the hundreds, how are their arms holding up from maybe the way you all look at it that is at times different from us?
I think remarkably well. We're still conscious of having to manage the innings. We plan on doing that. I do think there's going to be, a time for us, and it might be mid-August, where we make whatever adjustments we're going to make. We do feel like we have, in-house solutions to make that happen. Whereas if we may go to a 6-man rotation, we may try, a traditional long reliever to piggyback with a young starter. But at the end of the day, I think his last start against Toronto was fabulous. It was an unfortunate 4-pitch walk to Whit Merrifield that cost him later on in the inning. But I thought the start itself was fabulous. yesterday and what I would consider, more of a Coors Field type environment in Minnesota with 100 degrees and a jumpy ball, because when it's hot and humid like that, the ball jumps. And I thought Bryce Miller was awesome. Filled it up, gave us every chance, took us deep into a game, and it was the best, the best he's held his velocity through a game in quite some time. He looked very comfortable, and that's all we're looking for is how much stress do they show as they're working through these innings. And right now they don't really appear to be showing us that stress. So we'll continue to manage it by using our eyes.
You didn't go to Taylor Swift this week, did you?
I did not, but I was fascinated with the pour out and the number of people who flew into Seattle to see it. And, I've gotten some feedback from the Swifties at the office who are, they were pretty excited about being at the show.
Okay.
And I've gotten some lowdown on what life as a Swiftie is like.
Yeah.
And that was, it was interesting.
Anybody make you a beaded bracelet or anything like that?
Nobody did, but I actually heard, and this is, it's going to date me, and and I guess in some way reference my stodginess. But one of my coworkers said, "It's the greatest night of entertainment I've ever seen." I said, 1985. It was August at the Meadowlands. Bruce Springsteen playing in Jersey, and 6-hour show, laying on the stage, telling us stories. I get it, but man, that was, I don't know if it could get any better than that.
Well, you have to reference Bruce Springsteen if you're going to work in baseball. I think that's it's an actual requirement for the job that you have. That and being able to pull all-nighters here over the course of the next few days leading into what should be a fascinating trade deadline. Jerry, Brock said that he doesn't know how you and Justin don't drink earlier at the end of every night. We're just waiting to see what you end up coming up with. So thanks for doing it. And when we talk to you next week, the trade deadline will be in the rearview mirror.
All right, guys.